During the first decades of the 1800s, Americans migrated westward at an exhaustive rate. Enticed to the Ohio Valley and beyond by the prospect of cheap land and rich soil. For many, leaving the East behind was at once bittersweet and exhilarating. One cross-country traveler recalled the experience.
Old America seems to be breaking up and moving westward. A cart and single horse frequently afford the means of transfer. Often the back of the poor pilgrim bears all his effects, and his wife follows, naked-footed, bending under the hopes of the family.
Many pioneering settlers traveled by foot or wagon over the National Road, the first interstate highway built by the federal government. It ran from Cumberland, Maryland, on the Potomac River, all the way to Vandalia, Illinois, a total of nearly 600 miles. Others navigated the region's waterways. Hi-oh, away we go, floating down the river on the Ohio, became the song of thousands of enthusiastic migrants. Over time, wagons, stagecoaches, and flatboats gave way to more efficient means of transportation, both to move people across the continent and to deliver raw materials and finished goods to markets. In 1807, Robert Fulton's steamboat, the Clermont, began a profitable New York to Albany service. Fulton's Folly, as it was called, proved to be anything but, making the 150-mile run in just 32 hours. A few years later, Henry Shreve added horsepower and other improvements to Fulton's design, opening the Mississippi, Ohio, and Red Rivers to steamboat navigation. Harper's Magazine applauded side-wheeled steamboats like Shreve's George Washington, saying they had
grown out of the needs of our commerce, not only original to us in form of construction, but splendid in appearance.
What these vessels offered in gilded elegance, they often lacked in creature comforts. The American wildlife artist, John James Audubon, complained that steamboats were
the very filthiest of all filthy old rat traps I ever traveled in.
Paralleling the rise of the steamboat, Americans built more than 3,000 miles of canals between 1816 and 1840. The Canal of Canals was New York Governor DeWitt Clinton's Big Ditch, the Erie. Begun in 1817, the Erie Canal connected the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean via the Hudson River. It gave rise to cities such as Albany, Utica, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. And it revolutionized trade. The cost of shipping a ton of grain from Buffalo to New York City fell from $100 to just $5, and journey times were cut in half. To compete with the Erie and other canals, entrepreneurs in Maryland broke ground on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in 1828. The rail line was designed to link the city of Baltimore with the Ohio River and the West. Initially, horses pulled carts along the dual track. Then, in 1830, the B&O's Peter Cooper built a steam-powered locomotive. The 1-ton Tom Thumb promised to be even faster than a horse. Over the next 20 years, railroads replaced canals as the easiest and cheapest way to move goods and people. And by 1840, the United States had about 3,000 miles of railroad track, mostly in the north. Regardless of how settlers arrived on the frontier, pioneer life could be very difficult. The physical and emotional trials gave rise to an austere and independent character. An English traveler described those he encountered as
a daring, hardy race of men who live in miserable cabins, unpolished but hospitable, kind to strangers, honest and trustworthy.
Primitive campsites or hastily constructed shanties provided initial shelter for most settlers. Those who did not succumb to disease, depression, or premature death might one day build a log cabin with a window, chimney, and partitioned rooms, and clear a substantial plot for farming. Speculators bought large tracts of frontier land. If prices rose, they sold parcels or lots for a profit. Doctors, lawyers, storekeepers, and others followed, and the first towns and cities rose from the forests and prairies. Cities like Detroit, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Chicago witnessed explosive growth during the early 1800s. Christened the most splendid city on the sunset side of the Alleghenies, Chicago was a frontier outpost during the War of 1812. By mid-century, its population had grown to 55,000. By 1900, the great metropolis on the prairie would claim nearly 2 million residents.